let's talk about how to unpack what is underneath you needing to lose your cool with your kids' tantrums so that you can actually stop it. My name's Jodie Thornton, and there are so many parenting advice places you can go where people will say that either you just need to stop losing your cool, that it's not okay, maybe take some deep breaths. And there are other places that will say, look, it's just normal to lose your cool with your child's tantruming. It's okay, we're all human, it's going to happen. But ultimately, some of us really want to unpack what's going on so that we don't pass on the same level of messaging around big feelings. We want to be our child's safe space so that they know no matter how big their feelings are, that we can be their support. And so in that case, while we might not want to be harsh with ourselves, we don't want to be holding ourselves to expectations that are unrealistic. At the same time, we do want to make sure that we are unpacking and making the losing cool less and less frequently, and then hopefully getting to a place where it just doesn't happen anymore. And again, we want to be realistic. We may not get to a place where it doesn't happen anymore, but we definitely want to be making some progress on how we handle our feelings in those really stressful times. So the first thing we want to think about is we want to figure out what is actually going on for you during those tantrums. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. One of the ways is to notice in the moment, what are you thinking? You can notice what would you say if you knew it wouldn't be unkind to your child. Like, what would you actually say to them? Like, it is ridiculous for you to have these feelings, or I can't believe you're upset again, or how much can I possibly need to do? Like, we're looking for, like, what would you say if it was okay for you to be really brutal and honest in that moment. Not suggesting you say it, but be kind with yourself if you have. Then another way to look at it is to, after you've calmed down, look back at, like, what was going on for me, what was I thinking and feeling, and perhaps even thinking about, like, what sensations were there in your body. Sometimes when we focus on the sensations that were in your body, you can reconnect with what was going on, even if the thoughts weren't particularly discrete or descriptive at the time. And another way you can do it is actually to grab your phone and there's a voice record function on your phone, and record yourself just saying what happened from your perspective, and just letting yourself just say whatever you need to say, and looking for what are the times where the tone or intensity in your voice shifts, because that's a key to being like what is actually really important for you in those moments. Once you've noticed that, then what we're looking for is to distinguish between three separate issues. Number one is that there's something going on around your expectations or your understanding of your child's perspective. So expectations might be something like children shouldn't get this upset over nothing, right? Now, or it could be I expect that if I've done everything you've asked all morning, that in the afternoon I'd be able to have a cup of tea in peace. Now, if we look at those expectations and your child's perspective, ultimately, if the tantrum's happening, there's something not working, right? Like, we can go through all of this thing of, like, it's normal for children to have overwhelm, and, you know, we want to think about it from their perspective. But ultimately, if there is a tantrum happening, something is happening to cause this for your child. They're not doing it on purpose. Even if it's one of those tantrums that people might call, like, I don't like this term, but people would call it manipulative. So a tantrum where they're not emotionally overwhelmed, but they're just trying to get you to do something their way. Even those tantrums, they're not doing it on purpose. What they're doing is trying to get their need met, right? And so we're looking for is that there's something off there. A, they don't have a way to get their need met that works for everybody else around them. Or B, they don't know how to sit with the feelings of disappointment or frustration that they can't get what they need in that moment, right? There's always a reason why the tantrum is happening. So if we're looking at those expectations, one of the shifts that you can have is just looking at that, you know, it's a tantrum, therefore there is a problem. Like, it's not a case of your child is choosing whether to make this a problem or not. And then secondly, one of the ways to shift out of this is to really understand your child's perspective, to really look at what is going on, what is causing this tantrum. And once you shift that, it can make all the difference in whether you lose your cool. If you can go, okay, I can understand this is what's going on for my child. You know, it might seem a little bit out of reach to do that, but I'm going to get some tips on how we do that in our third section. The second thing that can be going on is that you either don't have the skills to help your child to calm down, or you don't have a plan to be able to use those skills reliably in the moment. And in that way, what happens is if our child is distressed and we experience our child being distressed, our nervous system wants us to respond. We're biologically wired to respond to somebody in distress. And so if we know that they're in distress and we do not know how to help, the only way to not be upset by that is to repress your feelings. It's the only way, right? It really is the only way. And so what we want to do is go, okay, so I know how I'm going to respond. So that includes the empathy skills to help your child to calm down, the problem-solving skills to help your child figure out how do I get that underlying need met, so it's not necessarily what they're asking for, but the underlying need. And then third, the skills to use when your child is having an overwhelmed moment at a moment that you can't help. So you might be tending to the baby, you might be doing the dishes, or the dinner's going to burn, or whatever reason, you might be overwhelmed yourself. Whatever the reason is, you know what to do when your child is overwhelmed and you cannot help them in that moment. And if you have those three skills in place, then you're less likely to lose your cool. And then the third thing that can be happening is our baggage is coming up. So it can just literally be we have big feelings that we've pushed down because most of us adults, not everybody, but most of us adults did not learn emotional regulation skills as children. And what we call emotional regulation as adults is actually repressing our feelings. So it's actually telling ourselves, it doesn't matter if you get your needs met. You'll be fine. Have gratitude in this moment for what is going well. It could be worse. Like all of those messages, and I say them with a little bit of a tone that's probably a little bit intense for what it should be, but all of those messages are telling ourselves to not pay attention to our feelings, to not worry about whether we get what we need, which is not actually regulation. That's emotional repression, that's emotional denial. So for most of us, if we're pushing feelings down day to day as things happen, what happens then is when somebody else is having emotional expression, it's like, well, hey, what about these feelings that I've been feeling all day, that I've been pushing down? They can sometimes come up for air. Another thing that can happen, we might have our own baggage around, well, hey, I'm not doing the things that my parents did to me that were unhelpful. Why is your emotional regulation worse than what mine was? You know, like this idea of like, well, I'm doing better. Why is this not better? Why is this worse for me? It can be things around, well, when will my needs get met? Like I've been doing everything you need all day and now I can't even have a cup of tea without you having a tantrum because I won't play with you. It can be this baggage around, why don't I matter too? And there can be so much other baggage, but we're looking for like, what is the baggage that's coming up? And so our first step is just to notice, is this issue around our expectations or understanding our child's perspective? Is it around whether or not we have the skills and we know how to use them reliably? Or is this about our baggage? And once you know which of those three things is going on, then it makes it much easier to unpack and figure out what to do so that this happens less and less often. Now, I have to say, when I'm starting out with new clients, often it's a combination of all three. Often we're not just looking at one issue, it's one issue at a time. And in that case, what we want to do is just pick the thing that is coming up either most frequently or the thing that is most intense when it comes up, and we just start there and we keep going until it's all done. But I just want to mention that it's not you're not a particularly difficult person if you have all three going on. If you have multiple things going on, that's totally normal. We're just going to pick them off one at a time. We're just going to deal with each piece one at a time until it's easy for you to hold space for your child's tantrums and not lose your cool. So once you've got those three things, we want to come up with a plan of what to do. And I will talk in the last step about how to come up with a plan for each of those things. You may already know what you want to do about those things. And then what we're going to do is, so your child has a tantrum, you lose your cool. At a later stage, might be straight away, might be significantly later, but you're going to go through, okay, which issue is either going on for me today or which one is the most urgent, right? Once you've got your, okay, this is what I'm going to do instead, then what we're going to do is preferably first hour of the morning or last hour of the evening. I know that that can be tricky, so any time of the day works. But if we do first hour of the day in the morning or last hour of the day in the evening, that's when our brains are more programmable. It is an easier time for our brains to take on new patterning. And so at that time of day, what we're going to do is go through, replay in your head when the tantrum, like the process of the tantrum, when would you wish you had noticed that something needed to be different? So sometimes it's like 20 minutes before the tantrum started, you notice that you personally needed a break and you didn't get that break. And so then when the tantrum started, then you had nothing left in the tank to help, right? That could be it. Or it could be the tantrum started, you held space for the first 5 minutes, but then you lost your cool at the end, right? Perhaps not the end. 5 minutes is a short time tantrum for some kids, but you know what I mean. So we're looking for what is the moment at which you wish you had taken a different trajectory. And at that moment, then you're going to map out, what would I have done if this was a normal habit for me? So if it's understanding, having different expectations or understanding your child's perspective, you're going to go, okay, so at this point, when my child's fists clenched, I was looking at it from a perspective of, like, it's fair for the kids to take turns, but what I could have understood about my child's perspective is that they are not yet able to wait, right? And so therefore it wouldn't have agitated me so much if I had remembered that at their age, they're just not as able to wait and they're going to need time and support to build this skill. That would have changed how I handled it. And you're going to play out what specifically you would have thought and done differently. And because what that does is it helps your brain, I'm pointing to my heart, but it helps your brain to build the neural connections as if you had done it in real time. It's not quite as effective, but it's very, very effective, especially when we repeat this as often as we need to. So you're going to go through, okay, this is what happened. This is where I wish I had taken a different trajectory. And this is what I would have done step by step by step. And if it's, I would have said something, actually create the words. What specifically would you have said to your child? What specifically might you have thought to yourself that is a different perspective there? And that being the case, you build up, it's almost like you're having practice at building up the habit so that the next time it comes, you've got that habit built up. Now, there's two pieces to the habit you're building here. The first habit you're building is around, like, what do you do when X, Y, and Z happens for your child? The second habit you're building is actually to unpack what is going on. And the more practice you get at this, the more you will be able to do that in the moment. You won't have to wait until later when you've calmed down. You won't have to wait until the time comes that you have space to really think about it. The more practice you get, the more you'll be able to unpack in this moment. Why am I agitated by this child's tantrum? Why am I not able to handle this differently? And you'll literally be able to have that emotional awareness that you can unpack it in the moment and choose differently in the moment. So we've got those two bits. One is the habits of how to respond to specific situations, but the second is the habit of knowing how to decide moment to moment, what does my child need in this situation? What do I need in this situation? So if you need some help in understanding your child's perspective and having realistic expectations, if you need some help in building the skills to help them to calm down in a tantrum and problem solve and have boundaries when you can't help but they are overwhelmed, then come along to my webinar on supporting kids through tantrums. in this webinar, we're going to go step by step how to use your body language, how to use your tone of voice, how to recognize like what is the underlying cause of the tantrum, and do some problem solving. So that's all going to be covered in that webinar, and you can find that one at jodithornton.com/tantrums. If you need some help on the baggage side of things, I highly recommend joining Confident Connected Parenting, my group program. In that program, we go through the steps of all of the pieces, so the skills that you need in parenting to help your child be emotionally aware and assertive, but also considerate. We're going through those pieces that make sure that they don't become people pleasers, but also that they get to know themselves and know how to be considerate of other people. But also what we do is regularly unpack the baggage, so getting an understanding of what does it take for me to identify what baggage I have, and then unpack it in such a way that it no longer impacts my parenting. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely reach out to me and we can organise you to join the program. Thank you so much for watching.